We were discussing role models or case studies. We started with Adi Parva and we were looking at Vasu as one of the ideal kings. And there was this Nala. The famous story of Nala Damayanti, it has become folk narratives. It is part of folk narratives all over the country. And whenever there are family quarrels between husband and wife, if either of them, husband or wife, goes to a Purohit, a soothsayer, and says, "Sir, I have problem in my house. My husband and myself are quarreling among themselves. We are not able to settle." Then they immediately say, "Go and read Naladamayanti Charitra. Do Parayana. Your problem will be solved." Because they look at that as a family story. Nala Damayanti, they got separated and they got united again. Because in the story there is a separation and getting united again. These Purohits say that same thing it is happening in your house also. You are getting separated and you will also get united. Do the Nala Damayanti story Parayana. And this Nala was the king of Nishadha kingdom. His kingdom was called Nishadha kingdom. And that is why he was called Naishadha. Nishadha's king is Naishadha. And the story of this Naishadha was narrated as a big kavya by Sri Harsha. That kavya is called Naishadham because it is the story of the Naishadha, the Nala. Nala is called Naishadha. And people use a proverb-like sentence called Naishadham Vidvadaushadham. It is written in such a profound language, strong language of Sanskrit, very hard language of Sanskrit, that if you can understand, if you can command, if you can interpret Naishadham, you can become a good Sanskrit scholar. It is written in such a hard language by Sri Harsha. Whatever is that book is known for its mantra shastra content also. People say that there is a mantra called Chintamani mantra in it, that is why it is very famous. And there are lots of things that are told about Naishadham. But the book is also known for the good governance by Nala, Nishadha's king. How Dharmika he was. All these stories, whichever was famous among the role models in the Adi Parva, in the Vamsha Charitra of Pandavas, they became kavyas. Vasu, it became a kavya called Vasu Charitra. Nishadha's story, Naishadham, it became a story. And one of the most important of those stories, which we should not miss at all while paying attention, is the story of Bharata. Because it is from the name of Bharata only the Vamsha got the name Bharata Vamsha. All the Pandavas and Kauravas are called Bharatas only. Because they are called Bharatas, the Yuddha, the war that took place in the end, is also called as Bharata Yuddha. The book is also called Bharata because it is the story of the Bharatas. And because it's a big book, it's a huge book, it is called Mahabharata. So, for all the names, Bharata, Mahabharata, Bharata Yuddha, Bharata Vamsha, everything, the root is Bharata, one of the kings who was in the lineage of Pandavas, among the ancestors of Pandavas. How did this Bharata come into existence? He is the son of a king called Dushyanta. And Dushyanta married Shakuntala, and that story again became a kavya. If you see Sanskrit literature, all the great kings who were role models from Vyasa's Mahabharata in the lineage, those stories were made into big kavyas. Shakuntala and Dushyanta story was taken up by Kalidasa to create his kavya called Abhignana Shakuntalam. In Abhignana Shakuntalam, he does his own addition of the story. What was not there in Mahabharata, original Mahabharata, he adds into that story. Technically, such stories are called Mishra Itivrittas. Itivrittas are stories are of three kinds. Prakhyata Itivrittas which have been coming from tradition from ancient period, and Utpadya Itivrittas which are fictitiously created by authors themselves, and Mishra Itivrittas. Prakhyata is given some mixing, Mishra, by the author. This is a Mishra Itivritta. Kalidasa is adding the story of ring and the ring getting into the mouth of fish and all that. That is not there in the original story. So in Mahabharata, the story is very simple. Dushyanta goes into the forest and he goes to the forest for hunting only. His goal was hunting, and then during hunting all the other soldiers got tired. So Dushyanta had to get down his cart, his ratha, and then he was going in search of some human communication. Then he found a garden there. He was wondering whose garden it could be. Then he realizes that it is an ashrama. Then he goes closer to the ashrama. Then he realizes that it is the ashrama of Kanva. And inside Kanvas Ashrama, he gets into the Kanvas cottage. There he meets Shakuntala. And there is a conversation between the two. Dushyanta says, I am in love with you, I want to marry you. But in the beginning, he just asks, who are you? Are you, you look like a Kshatriya girl, but you are found here. Who are you? Then she says, I am the daughter of Kanva. Then he says, no, it cannot be, it is not possible, because Kanva is a Brahmin, you look like a Kshatriya, it's not possible. And then Shakuntala narrates her story, how Vishwamitra was doing tapas and how Vishwamitra's tapas was to be disturbed by Indra, and how Indra employed Menaka. He asked Menaka to go and disturb the tapas of Vishwamitra. Menaka does it, and then Shakuntala is born because of Menaka and Vishwamitra making love to each other. Then Shakuntala is born. She narrates this story, and because of this story, now Dushyanta comes to know that Shakuntala is a Kshatriya Kanya only, because Vishwamitra at the time of doing tapas was a Rajarshi. He was a Kshatriya Rishi. So because he did not yet become a Brahmarshi, she is a Kshatriya's daughter only. So because she is a Kshatriya Kanya, I can marry her, he decides, Dushyanta decides, and she proposes that they have to get married through Gandharva Vivaha. Gandharva Vivaha is not an formal marriage, it is just an informal arrangement. They go and participate in intercourse, and at the time of participating in intercourse, to accept to participate in intercourse, Shakuntala proposes that her son should be made the Yuvaraja of the kingdom. Then Dushyanta agrees for that. Dushyanta goes to his kingdom, but never comes back. Then her son Bharata, Shakuntala and Dushyanta's son Bharata, grows to the age of becoming Yuvaraja, and then Kanvan comes and says, you take this son, go and demand Yuvaraja Abhisheka, Pattabhisheka for Bharata. She goes there. Dushyanta denies to recognize Shakuntala, and Shakuntala does not accept defeat. She stands in the court. She chides Dushyanta. She gives Upadesha to Dushyanta. Dushyanta still does not agree to recognize her. Then she decides that this is not possible, let me go back home. She starts to go back home, and then there is a voice from the sky announcing that, O Dushyanta, this lady Shakuntala is your wife only, that son is your son only, accept them and make Bharata into Yuvaraja. And because it's a voice coming from the sky, everyone in the court heard it, They consider that to be miracle, and they think that this miracle is possible because Shakuntala is really a Pativrata, and they accept her as their queen, and Dushyanta accepts her to be his wife, and he accepts the son, and he makes them Yuvaraj. This is the story. Now, let us see the Dharmika Dharma aspects of this. If you look at these hunting stories of all the kings in all the kavyas, including this story, why were they hunting? When Vyasa describes Dushyanta, he describes Mahabalaha. Repeatedly he mentions Dushyanta as Mahabala only. Why should he be a Mahabala all the time? Why his Bala has to be emphasized? Now we go back to this force theory of governance and understand that whether it is Vyasa or Kalidasa, whoever describes people like Dushyanta as per their power, their vigor, their physical stamina, their muscular power and all that, it was because during those times, according to that form of government, the king is a powerful person, physically powerful person. So Veerabhojya Vasundhara or Rajyam Veerabhojyam was there, so he was physically strong. That physical strength is described. But we have to note that immediately in the same shloka, the author says he was ruling the kingdom with dharma on all its four legs. He was ruling the kingdom just like the Krita Yuga kings were ruling. That is almost with 100% dharma. If we connect these two, the author is, Vyasa is indirectly telling you that governance is possible, 100% dharma is possible only if you are physically strong. In modern form of government, what is happening is the prime ministers or chief ministers are sharing this ability, the physical power, with the police or the military. They themselves are not physically so strong, but it is transferred, it is shifted to one of the agencies of the government, one of the wings of the government. So the police or the military are given this power. But in any form, physical strength is required, physical power is required, force is required, so that order is maintained, is emphasized in all these narrations. That is not against the modern theories of governance also. Force theory of origin of state also tells you, and if you are not an adolescent kind of thinker, you will always agree that police is required, military is required to maintain order, and Kshatriyas like Dushyanta had this physical power in themselves. Okay? Okay, the next step is he goes to hunting. Why? Why hunting? Whenever hunting is described in any kavya, scholars like Ramakrishna Prajataya, they have studied almost all the kavyas, so we can ask them. Every hunting description starts with a tribal person or the tribal chief coming to the king and announcing to him that the animals in my forest have grown beyond the required limits, sir. There are too many animals in the forest now. Our hunting is a limited hunting. We have no soldiers, a big army with us, so we cannot control this many animals with our small kind of bows and arrow hunting. So please come with your army, with all your soldiers, and then only the growing number of animals, particularly the wild animals in the forest, can be controlled, and on the invitation of the tribal chief only, the kings go for hunting. This is in Kavyas, not in Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, because it's an itihasa, it's a Purana, we have to always remember that people like Vyasa, when they are writing an itihasa, they cannot give you all these details like tribal chief has come, he invited, that is why Dushyanta has gone and all that. Because you have to narrate thousands of stories in the same book, you have to be very brief. But this idea that tribal chiefs used to come and invite the kings to go for hunting is described in other kavyas which are elaborations of the same idea. So, hunting was part of governance. Because to control the number of animals in the forest is also the responsibility of the king only. So ecological balance, environmental balance was brought by the king, and it was done on the request of the tribals only. It was done on the request of forest dwellers only. Correct, exactly. Yes, this has come to you from me only, not directly. I have been teaching this for 30 years in my classes. It has spread from my classes to all over the country now. Okay, in any case, that is true. I have been saying this in my teaching from a very long time. Hunting is a mock drill. For hunting was a mock drill for all these kings, because during peace times, non-war times, kings used to take their soldiers for hunting so that there is a physical exercise for them. So, but that is not directly governance, but controlling the number of animals in a forest was directly governance only. And how do you think that it is governance? Why tribal chiefs have come and asked for controlling the number of animals? Because they are getting troubled. And because tribals are part of his kingdom, he has to take care of the tribals also. Forests are also part of his kingdom, so he has to protect the tribal people also. So he used to go for hunting not for his own pleasure. It is also mentioned that he went for hunting for pleasure also. But his pleasure lies in physical exercise, in exerting his physical exercise, in executing his physical exercise. But that pleasure comes from protecting people also. That pleasure comes from reducing the number of animals inside the forest also. That is why the tribal chiefs are coming and asking him to go for hunting. He goes for hunting and controls the number of animals. Then he goes to the Kanvas Ashrama. This part I already covered yesterday. The violence and non-violence, grihastha and sannyasa interaction that we were discussing, this happens at that point. And finally, he marries Shakuntala through Gandharva Vivaha. But what is happening there at that point also? When he found Shakuntala to be Kshatriya woman, he did not proceed to marry her. When she said that she was Kanva's daughter, he did not proceed to marry. Only when he realized that she was a Kshatriya Kanya, he married. If we mention this today, that it was a good governance by a king, people say that this is casteism. By saying this, you are encouraging casteism. But the point there is, whether it is not caste or not, varna or not, the point is that there was a person who developed a sexual desire for a woman that was standing in front of him, but he was able to restrain that until dharma was established. What is the dharma is a different question. But if you are developing a sexual desire, if you are developing kama, for example, until kama is known to be according to dharma, you have to restrain. There has to be nigraha. That is what Dushyanta is demonstrating. Keep aside whether it is Brahmana, Kshatriya. Do you agree that even today, you develop sexual desire for a woman or whatever, do you immediately execute that? Is it safe for you? Not for the woman. For you, is it safe to immediately express that sexual desire? There was one police officer, KPS Gill. He was famous for controlling Khalistan movement in Punjab as a DGP. He was given all good assignments like this all the time because of his efficiency. After achieving all these things in life, one day he was participating in a party. Everyone was almost a little drunk at that time. There was a woman IAS officer walking there. He thought it was just a friendly gesture. He touched her on her buttocks and said, "Hey, how are you?" And she immediately complained to the police. There was a sexual harassment case filed on him. His entire career got spoiled. KPS Gill's career, he reached the peak and fell down to the ground just because of this. So, today, all over the world, sexual harassment is being considered to be a very big problem. And this problem and the code of conduct, work culture of all the organizations, all the corporate organizations all over the world is sending you the same communication that you have to restrain your sexual desire. Particularly for a king, Dushyanta is a king, Shakuntala is part of the citizens of the kingdom. If he could have even said that I am a king, I can have sex with any woman of my kingdom, but he did not do that. He could restrain the sexual desire that he got for the woman and waited until he knew that she is a Kshatriya woman. And even after knowing that she is a Kshatriya woman, he did not say, "Hey, come on, I'll have sex with you." No, he took permission. He proposed, and he proposed Gandharva Vivaha only when the woman agreed for Gandharva Vivaha. And because Manusmriti and other Dharma Shastras recommend that for Kshatriyas, Rakshasa Vivaha and Gandharva Vivaha are suitable, only after verifying, only after mentioning this to Shakuntala, that Rakshasa Vivaha and Gandharva Vivaha are the suitable methods. Among them I am choosing Gandharva Vivaha, would you agree? Then only after she agreed, only after she put a condition, took a promise, he participated in sex with her as part of Gandharva Vivaha. So, this is another ideal model in Dushyanta that is shown. But the notoriety of Dushyanta in this story comes from his not recognizing Shakuntala in the end of the story. People keep on saying Rama and Dushyanta are the two people that have been maligned so much for the same reason. Rama conducted Agni Pariksha is the one allegation on Rama, and Dushyanta did not recognize Shakuntala is the parallel. There was recently a discussion about this Rama conducting Agni Pariksha for Sita. Before coming back to Dushyanta, let me talk a little about this Rama conducting Agni Pariksha for Sita. How many of you think that Rama conducted Agni Pariksha for Sita? One, two, three, four, five. Almost everyone thinks that Rama conducted Agni Pariksha for Sita. Okay? In Valmiki Ramayana, there is no such mention that Rama conducted any Agni Pariksha for Sita. Okay? All of you go read on the internet. Valmiki Ramayana with English translation has been uploaded. Go study that. Go to that Yuddha Kanda towards the end. This part comes. Go see. Rama did not conduct any Agni Pariksha for Sita. The narration there is at the end of whole success of Yuddha, Rama talks to Sita and says, "Okay, Sita, you have lived with another man for such a long time. People might suspect that you had some relation with him. Now you are free. You can go anywhere. You can, for example, if you want to take shelter in Vibhishana's kingdom, you can go take shelter in Vibhishana's kingdom. If Lakshmana is ready to give you shelter, take shelter under Lakshmana. You go to any person who is ready to give you shelter." Remember, he did not say marry Vibhishana or marry Lakshmana or any such thing. He just said take shelter because I am leaving you. You can take shelter under anyone. Then Sita immediately says, "Hey Rama, what are you saying? You are speaking like an ordinary layman, a villager, uneducated person. And you are looking at me also to be an ordinary village, uneducated person, and because you have seen some uncultured people to be behaving badly, they go with every man that they come across or they marry everyone, you are unnecessarily suspecting me. Looking at some women, you are thinking that all women are like that. This is wrong. And then she goes on chiding him. You are behaving like a child, you are behaving like an immature person, and all that. And then she finally says, there is no other goal left for me than entering fire. It is she who says this. Rama does not say enter fire. Okay? Then she goes to Lakshmana and says, arrange fire for me because I want to enter into fire. Lakshmana looks at Rama, what to do? Rama says, okay, go ahead, arrange fire. Then Sita enters that fire. While Sita is entering into the fire, read Valmiki Ramayana, the entire crowd there shout. They say, no, Sita, please don't go. This is very bad. And they start weeping. Everyone starts weeping, crying. Gods, Vanaras, everyone. And all the gods and divinities land down from the sky. And Brahma among them starts speaking in behalf of all the gods and says, Rama, what is this? This is quite unbecoming of a great man. You are really a great man. You have come from a great lineage and you have been a great king. You behaved so nicely at every step. But what did you do now? This is a very bad step that you took. You ignored while Sita entered fire. They did not say you arranged the fire. You asked her to enter the fire. They just said you are ignoring. Upeksha is the word that is used there. Then Rama says, O Brahmadeva, you are saying that I am the avatar of Vishnu. I do not remember anything. I consider myself only to be the son of Dasharatha, an ordinary human being. If you know anything about my precedents or previous birth and all that, because you are a god, you go on, you tell me. But I consider myself only to be a human being. While this discussion goes on, Agni Deva comes out from the fire, holds Sita in his hands and hands over Sita to Rama. And immediately Rama says, this is what I knew that was going to happen. I did not say this to all of you because miracles have to happen, only then people have to talk about them. I cannot say, see, come on friends, now some miracle is going to take place. I am going to send Sita into fire, she is going to come out. Because now the miracle has happened, now I will tell you, there is no one else that believes Sita's chastity more than me. Sita is part of my life. Sita is my breath. Sita is my prana. Sita is my life breath. How can I suspect her? I knew that this was going to happen. I wanted to show you the miracle. Now everyone knows the chastity of my wife. And I already knew it. I always knew it. But I proved it in front of all of you so that no one considers me to be a gullible man, a foolish man, a stupid man who accepts anything to happen in the world. Now that you all know, we are leaving this place, and he goes with Sita. This is exactly verbatim description from Valmiki Ramayana. I am talking in front of Ramakrishna Pajataya, who reads Valmiki Ramayana every day, shloka after shloka, and he is reading it on his mobile also now from Yuddha Kanda. Sir, any correction? Huh? Which second rejection? That Uttarakanda. That's no, that's not interpolation. That's also there. But let us see about this. The Western Indologists and others who talk about this story, they themselves say that Uttarakanda was not composed by Valmiki, because Valmiki comes as a character there. They say Bharadwaja, the Shishya of Valmiki, composed the Uttarakanda. So, you cannot say that the same Valmiki is composing both the stories and every time he is making Sita get punished. Okay, that's one point. Second point is, actually it is this part that comes close to Dushyanta story that we are talking about. If you see the narration in Uttarakanda, after sending Sita to forest, it is Rama who weeps after sending her out. And weeping, he falls down, he goes into trance, and people come to console him. When his mother comes and says, she also chides him, according to that Uttarakanda part. She says, you have done something very bad. And then Rama says, there are two Ramas. One is the king of Ayodhya, the other is the husband of Sita. Here, the one who is weeping is the husband of Sita, but the one who has done that part is the king of Ayodhya. As a king of Ayodhya, I had to respect the public opinion. But as the husband of Sita, I am weeping. Actually, I narrated this story in many mailing lists recently. I am narrating the same story to you, an actual happening. One film director from Mumbai was given a 60 crore project to make, to document folk Ramayanas when they are narrated by folk people. And he read a story, an essay by a Telugu speaking professor from America, in which he wrote that in Telugu there are folk Ramayanas in which they scold Rama, folk people scold Rama. He told this to BBC and BBC was very happy. BBC said, oh, Rama is scolded, so you document this. For this I will give you 60 crores. And this fellow accepted part of the money as advance. He took that and he brought all his camera crew, everything. He came to Hyderabad with the recommendation of one of our friends, Goldman. And because Goldman was our friend, we accepted. He came and then he proposed, he was telling us that he wants to document folk Ramayanas in which Rama is scolded. We said, there is no such folk Ramayana in Telugu. We never heard such a thing. Then he said, okay, you keep on taking me to from place to place. I myself will find it out. We took him to several different places. Everywhere he was disappointed. There was no folk Ramayana where they were scolding Rama. But at one place, it was a tribal village. They were discussing the Uttara Ramayana only. The folk women were dancing in a circular dance. While it is a clapping dance, they bend and they raise. Uyala dance they call in Hyderabad, in the Telugu speaking areas. So they were doing that and they were singing this Lavakusha story. And as part of the story, Sita is sent to the forest and they were weeping. They were with pathetic moods and melodies. They were singing the song of lamenting Sita being sent to the forest. This fellow, filmmaker who was standing there, he was very happy. He was asking me, why are they weeping? Why are they weeping? Then I was one of the translators from my team. So I said, they are lamenting Sita being sent to the forest. Oh, yeah, this must be the place where they are scolding Rama. Then I said, no, they are not scolding Rama. They are just lamenting Sita being sent into exile. He said, no, you are not translating properly. I will ask directly. And he stopped them. He talked to the tribal women. He asked in English and translated. He asked them, are you not scolding Rama? Immediately one of the tribal women said, hey, who are you? From where did you come? You want me to scold Rama? Rama, you do not know how strongly he wept after sending Sita away. In spite of being educated, you don't understand Rama's weeping after he sends Sita away. Who else can weep for Sita more than Rama? She started speaking, she started giving a big speech about Rama's agony after sending Sita away. And she explained, as a king, he had to do that. But as a husband, he was weeping. It was a tribal woman who said this. And meanwhile, when she was giving speech, some boys who were attending, these tribal boys, they went to the tribal chief and said that somebody asked to scold Rama. All the tribals came with weapons. The chief also came there. The first weapon was kept on my neck. They said, the tribal chief said, "You are a monkey. Hey monkey, where did you come from? You brought some people from somewhere else who are asking us to scold Rama. Whoever is asking us to scold Rama will be cut into pieces now." It was a hard time for me to escape. I told the tribal chief, I am just translating. He does not understand translating. So I said, "See, those people are from Bombay. They don't know our language. So I am just putting everything into Telugu. They are the people who asked this question." He said, "Then get lost. I'll kill him." I had to save him because I brought him there. Then I gestured to him, "Please leave the place." Secretly I gestured to him. He packed up all the cameras, everything. He was leaving. Then the tribal chief was saying, "You are allowing them to escape." Then I told them, "See, they are our guests after all. We are all friends. We are of the same community. We should not hurt them," and all that. He escaped somehow. I saved him finally. But it is the tribal woman who was explaining the logic. They know, the tribals know. And this kind of explanation he faced at several different places. Educated women almost like you, she used to look like you. He went there, he asked her to sing Ramayana related songs. There are many Ramayana related songs, for example, marriage songs. Marriage songs also have Rama, Sita as characters. And a woman like this was singing. He then allowed them to sing and he was taking a video. Then he was prodding me. "Go ask to sing about Rama, scold Rama and all that." How can they scold Rama? It should be there in this song. Then I asked that lady, "Ma'am, he is asking for some song where Rama is scolded. Do you know any song where Rama is scolded?" That woman did the same thing. He said, "Who is this fellow? He is asking me to scold Rama. He wants me to get Papa by doing all this." No, I am not going to do. There is no song like that where Rama is scolded. And then she has a PhD also, that lady. And she said, "Boy, you sit. I'll explain to you." And he explained all the logic of why Rama does what in the Yuddha Kanda and why he did this in other places. At the end, basically, one of his assistants is a Christian boy called Jesse Fernandez, who came from Delhi. That boy, from the beginning itself, he was telling him, "This is not possible, you will not get the songs." Towards the end, he said, he got a very good lesson because women told him, tribals told him, rural people told him. So he got the training of understanding Ramayana, not from you people, but from everyone else in the society. Now he will never ask people to sing songs of scolding Rama. Yeah. No, probably that is the same article. That article is written by Velcheru Narayana Rao. This Velcheru Narayana Rao lives in United States. He was living for a very long time in Wisconsin University Madison campus. Now he has left and living somewhere in the southern part, Texas or Dallas or somewhere he is living. It is his article only. It is a book called Many Ramayanas, and this article is called Their Own Ramayana. This book, Many Ramayanas, was prescribed for the UG students of Delhi University. And there was a big controversy because ABVP students went and opposed prescribing Many Ramayanas as a text for UG students. So this is all well known. No, I brought these incidents, the real incidents that have taken place, to tell you that we sit here and discuss whether Marxist interpretations or this kind of interpretations are correct or wrong and all that. Who have answered? Tribals. They know the logic of how Rama is a god despite sending Sita to exile. The logic they were explaining to the filmmaker. I asked the filmmaker in the end, now do you understand that there is no Ramayana which calls Rama? His response was, it could be somewhere, but my exploration was not enough. But because there was a bad incident, I am leaving from this place, but someday I will be able to find it out. He is so incorrigible that he probably later searched for those Ramayanas all the time. And it was the same with me also, when some people told that in Tamil Nadu, in some places, Ravana is worshipped and Rama is scolded. I went in search of those places. Whatever place they mentioned in the Hindu article, it was a news in Hindu. So I took the name, place of the name and travelled all the way to that place. That place does not even have a Rama temple or Ravana temple. There was only a Shiva temple there in that place. The same place name that they mentioned in the Hindu article in Tamil Nadu, I saw only a Shiva temple in that place. And then I told the people, I came in search of Ravana worship. They said, why should we worship Ravana? Where is Ravana worship? Then one of the persons were educated. That person told me, see, probably somebody wrote an article by misunderstanding. We have some temples of Shiva in Tamil Nadu where Ravanasura's sculpture is there. And we keep that sculpture of Ravana as the Jyotisha reader. He is the Panchanga reader. There is a book in his hand in the sculptures. So he reads the Panchanga for Shiva as one of the Pramatha Ganas of Shiva. There, after his death, he went to Kailasa. He became part of Kailasa members. So he was the Panchanga reader for Shiva every day. So to depict that in our temples, we keep a Ravana Vigraha where he reads the Panchanga. But we don't worship that sculpture. It is only a sculpture. As part of the Shiva temple, as paraphernalia, we keep that. So probably somebody misunderstood that to be Ravana worship and wrote an article. This educated person from that village was telling me about this. Then it was a rational explanation. I actually thought, okay, this person is very intelligent, and he was explaining. And then I visited some places like Nallayappan Koil from Tirunelveli. You know this place, Tirunelveli? There is a famous Nallayappan Koil. Very famous Shiva temple, which is one of the Tillai. There are 5 Tillais of Nataraja. One of them is this Nallayappan Koil. Inside that also I found this Ravanasura, and at many Shiva temples later, after I heard this story, I saw the Ravanasura sculpture in many Shiva temples in Tamil Nadu. Probably somebody misunderstood. He was saying, but actually it's not. They were deliberately writing this kind of story. They concocted this story that there is Ravana worship. So, I am a fieldwork based person. I don't go only by books. Whenever I know something, I go to the place and study, live with the people and study the culture, interview them. So, based on my studies, let me tell you, ma'am, that Rama sending Sita to exile is understood as an ethical dilemma. There is a concept called ethical dilemma. So, when there is an ethical dilemma, there is a conflict between 2 kinds of ethics. Ethics have 2 dimensions, public dimension and private dimension. Private dimension of ethics, for example, a husband and wife relation, a lover and beloved relation, these are ethics. Ethics in these contexts are called ethics of private dimension. And there are ethics of public dimension, for example, a corporate staff receiving clients for the company, a salesman going to the seller, buyers, and chief minister and the people, the king and the people. These are public dimension. So ethics in these contexts are called ethics of public dimension. The same person is a husband and a king. The same person is a salesman and a husband. So whereas in some contexts, public dimension ethics and private dimension ethics come in conflict. You can narrate the story the way you are targeting the audience. For example, if you are writing a chicklit book like Chetan Bhagat, you can take the same story and show that this fellow does not care for public ethics at all, he cares only his lover. He gives up the job, for example, and saves his lover and runs away. All the adolescent children who read these kind of books, they say, see, such a great lover, he deserted the army. He deserted the army for the sake of his beloved. He gave up his job, he resigned his job for the sake of his lover. Then, from the private perspective, those people who love the private dimension of ethics, they praise him as a romantic hero. But if you are writing a book targeting mature people, adult people, particularly those who care for public ethics more than private ethics, then you will show that he does not care for his private relationship. For example, if the lover has committed something wrong, he punishes her as per his job. Then people who read this book praise him. They say, see, he is such a committed officer, he is such a committed judge, he is committed army man. He receives a telegram that his wife is in trouble, he is holding a gun and the enemy soldier is standing in front of him. He is continuing his war despite listening about the problems of his wife. So he is not caring for private dimension, he is caring for public dimension. We appreciate him. Okay? So whenever there is an ethical dilemma between private and public ethics, if persons care for public ethics, some kind of people appreciate that. If people care for private dimension of ethics, some other people appreciate that. In English literature, one of the famous play is called Doll's House. Ibsen's play. Ibsen wrote that story. In that, actually, that story is projected, the play is projected as a women's lib drama. And Nora, the heroine in that story, she commits a technical illegal mistake in a bank transaction. The husband, she asks her husband to protect her, save her. He doesn't agree. This story, the author is showing that she rebels against him, she bangs the door and goes. This banging the door gets repeated in the play. She goes on banging the door and leaves the house, and people admire her for banging the door and leaving the husband and going away, because that husband did not protect her. But if you look at that story from the point of view of ethics, bank ethics, public ethics, what the husband has done is correct, right? But from a women's lib point of view, what Nora has done is correct. So it all depends on from where you are looking at the story. So in governance, in kinghood, in running the state, which is important? Our discussion is state. Our discussion is governance. Our discussion is how to run the state as a king. It is your king's responsibility. From that point of view, from a king's point of view, from governance point of view, if you are facing a dilemma, a conflict between private ethics and public ethics, which would you appreciate? This is not a class on romance. This is not a class on private relationships and eros and all that. This is not a Shrungara class. This is a class on statecraft. We are discussing state and governance. So in a discussion on state and governance, people will be interested in public ethics only, ethics of public dimension only. So if there is a dilemma, if somebody resolves the dilemma in favor of public dimension of ethics only, that is good governance. That is good kinghood. That is a good responsibility of a king, right? So Dushyanta, when he did not recognize Shakuntala, he uses the word Loka Pavada Bhiti as a reason for why he rejected. Then he says it is public dimension. In public dimension, I cannot say some woman has come with her son and immediately I accept, oh, she is beautiful, right? And I will accept her as my queen and the son as my prince. I should convince my people that she is really my wife and that boy is really my son. How can I do that? Just my announcement is not enough. I cannot be as dictatorial and autocratic as to say that, yeah, she is my wife. I am saying you should accept it. I should not be autocratic like that. I should push her to some corner. And I know that a pativrata, when she is pushed to corner, the divine entities respond. And I deliberately, knowingly that divine entities will respond if I push her to corner, I was pretending to be not recognizing. Then divine entities really responded. I knew that Shakuntala is Pativrata and I know that divine entities would respond. They responded. Now all of you know. Because divine entities have announced that she is my wife and he is my son, now you all agree. That is how a king should behave, he says. Okay? So now today we might say divine entities speaking from the sky, all this is nonsense. But when we read Narnia story, a lion speaks, right? Do you know Narnia on TV? The lion keeps saying, let us go. Yeah, it's beautiful. Lion can speak. And you have sci-fi stories. Somebody has an antenna on the head. Somebody has a TV on the stomach. We agree. But we don't agree that this story, whenever you are talking about value dimensions, ethics dimensions, you should not go into the details of whether there is an antenna on the head or TV on the stomach or he was wearing pant or he was wearing dhoti or whether he was wearing spectacles. Those things are outer details, dresses and all those things. Similarly, Devata speaking, sky speaking, all these things are outer dimensions. Point is the value, the logic, that is the reasoning that he is using. He is saying if I do this, her chastity gets established and then all the public will accept her as their queen, they will accept the prince as their prince, then only I can announce him as Yuvaraja, that is why I did all this, he is saying. Okay, so Dushyanta story is very similar to the Rama story. At both the places there is a conflict between roles of the same person. Same person has got a role conflict, he is a king and a husband, and he resolved in favor of public dimension. That is why he is considered to be doing good governance. He is in favor of public, he is in favor of people, not in favor of his love affair or not in favor of his husband and wife relationship. Yeah. Yeah, he even sells Chandramati, Taramati. In North India it is called Taramati, in South India it is called Chandramati. The same character. Harishchandra sells his wife for paying the money to Vishwamitra, he sells his wife. In all these cases, everywhere people look at these stories from the role conflict, value conflict and ethical conflict. Somebody decides in favor of one dimension of ethics and ignores the other dimension of ethics. Same story can be narrated to different kinds of audience. Those who care for one dimension of ethics, they consider that to be very good heroism. For others, it looks to be villainy. Okay, so Rama's story from the point of view of lovers and love may be a very bad story. Rama may be considered to be a bad man, saying that I don't recognize you. But there are highly romantic expressions by Rama at the end of this fire incident. When Agni Deva brings Sita on his shoulders, he says, there can be no great lover of Sita than myself, he says. I knew that this was going to happen also. You read those shlokas there in Valmiki Ramayana. He very clearly says, I knew that this was going to happen. He very clearly says, there can be no great lover than Sita than me, and all that. So even from a lover's point of view, he is a great lover. Only thing he did is, he used a technology that probably you don't believe, that fire can bring back a woman or whatever. If Narnia lion can speak, fire can bring Sita. If there can be an antenna on the head of a sci-fi character, fire can bring Sita. These are stories with the technologies and abilities that are not believable by people like us. Okay. Yes, actually, probably sci-fi characters, whatever they have, are not realistic also. They are not real. They don't exist. But when we read the story, do we look at the TVs and antennas on the characters, or their iron hands and machine hands and all that? We are getting emotionally moved by the values that are in the story. Even if you watch Terminator, when you watch Terminator, are you looking at the machine hand? It gets molten, and the molten hand comes back again into the real hand form and all that. Do we say, oh, this is impossible, wrong, so let us just leave the hall? In fact, on the other hand, we say, what a movie, what a visualization, what a movie production, how did they produce this and all that, all because it is Hollywood. Huh? Yeah, Lord of the Rings movie, anything, any movie, we are not looking at those technology aspects or their costumes and all that, we are looking at the values. So, many misunderstandings that you have about Sita's Agni Pravesha, that Rama has asked Sita to enter fire. It is not there in Valmiki Ramayana, friends. First of all, remember this. And the upeksha is the word that is used, and Rama says, I did upeksha because, he says that. Okay. Because I knew that she would come out safely, he says. Okay. So, our context was Dushyanta. So, Dushyanta is being shown as a role model for Pandavas. And when Vyasa is showing Dushyanta as a role model for Pandavas, who gave very good legacy to Pandavas, how can Vyasa make Dushyanta to be a bad man? How can Vyasa make Dushyanta to be an unfaithful husband who does not recognize his wife? So, if you want to understand the story from the author's point of view, when he is presenting an ideal character or a character as an ideal, you should interpret the character from Vyasa's point of view. If you interpret the character from Vyasa's point of view, you will be able to realize that Dushyanta is being praised by Vyasa for caring for public ethics, neglecting private ethics. I told you that one of the things I do is to train people for civil services exams. Recently in the exam, they introduced a paper called Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude. I teach ethics course for them. There is a section of the examination which is called case studies. They give them case studies. There are, most of the case studies they present in the exam are ethical conflicts only, ethical dilemmas. And students keep asking me, sir, how should I answer? Whenever there is a conflict between private ethics, most of the case studies that they give in the exams are conflict between private ethics and public ethics only. They ask me, how should I answer this question? Should I support private ethics or public ethics? Natural common sense answer is, what job are you going to perform? For what job did you apply? It's a public job. It's a public services. So, which answer would the examiner appreciate? If you support public dimension and ignore private dimension only, you will be appreciated by the examiner, right? So, we are here, this class also, in this lecture also, we are focusing on statecraft, we are focusing on governance, it is public dimension. From that point of view, ignoring private dimension and caring for public dimension only is correct. It is not a love story. We are not discussing Shringara Rasa here. Okay?
This bureaucratic system in India. Most of the thought is that during the colonial period, the Indian civil services was established. Now this gave a fleet of bureaucrats for the British to have the governance place. After independence, the suggestion from a few friends is that just the C changed to A and the same system prevailed. Now instead of them reporting to a British government, they started reporting to the elected government. Now from our perspective, is this the right way of going? Is this something that works from the Mahabharata perspective also?
Yeah. I was going to go to Vidura after this discussion. If time permits, I would go, otherwise I will take it up in the morning. There are two things about bureaucracy. I think Max Weber, who wrote about bureaucracy for the first time, you know Max Weber? How many of you know Max Weber? His name is mentioned in management books, his name is mentioned in public administration books. Everywhere, wherever they discuss classical bureaucracy, they mention the name of Max Weber. But this Max Weber is not a public administration man, he was not even a management man. He was a sociologist. He was purely a sociology man. He was writing all sociology books, and as part of his sociology books, he wrote books on social organization. And as one of the social organizations, he wrote books on bureaucracy. And in that book, he describes features of bureaucracy that they are borrowing in public administration and management books like rationality, efficiency, and kinds of authority, charismatic, traditional, and regal rational authority, and all this. They are borrowing from that book of Max Weber only. This author or any other author after Max Weber, they did not bring out one very crucial point of the reason for the origin of bureaucracy that I am bringing out in my book on a very important concept about studies, history of studies, that is already studied by several anthropologists, but you young people have to make note and study that concept that is called orality and literacy. Okay? Orality, oral, from oral you get the word orality, and from written you get the word literacy. Okay? There is a lot of literature on this discussion between orality and literacy. Societies were oral for a very long time, particularly Oriental societies were extremely oral till recently. That is, there was no written documentation, there were no documents for example, properties and all that. Oral communication only was happening. Those days, for example, in the king's court, how many clerks were there? Entire king's fort had only one or two clerks who were accountants to keep accounts. And in India, the fort was there only in the city. Most of the other parts were small towns or majority were villages, and even bigger were forests with tribal settlements. In all these places, there was no need of any clerk, because it was all local democratic running of the village, democratic running of the tribal area and all that. It was all orally run. Tribal panchayats were running the tribal areas, and village panchayats, caste panchayats were running. They were all orally run. But gradually, even the Western society did not have so much of literacy, and particularly printing was not there. Once literacy entered, once documentation entered, the staff that were appointed were for documentation. And this created offices. This created hierarchy of documentation. This led to bureaucracy. So, my diagnosis of the origin of bureaucracy is literacy. Basically, it all originated out of literacy and printing also. So, because of technology change and because of change from orality to literacy, a system called bureaucracy had to emerge. Okay, so from this perspective, you can easily imagine why there is no mention of bureaucracy in books like Mahabharata, Ramayana, Bhagavata. It was not there. not only in books like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavata, which are itihasas and Puranas, even in actual history, if you go to, say, for example, Ashoka's time, how can there be a bureaucracy? You understand how Ashoka's kingdom was run. There was Ganarajyas, Ashoka's fort was there. There was no possibility of a bureaucracy there. So, bureaucracy as it exists today, we should not imagine that to be existing even in Europe, in the ancient Europe, that did not exist. It did not exist anywhere in the world. It is a modern development. It is a development of literacy. It is a development of printing. Okay. But we have a word called bureaucratic thinking. In public administration textbooks, they talk about neutrality, commitment, generalist, specialist, all these things, right? Who said that he comes from public administration while introducing themselves? Okay, you did your public administration study and you have taken these answers by heart. Did you take generalist, specialist, controversy, neutrality versus commitment and all that? So one of the biggest features that is mentioned about a bureaucrat, he is behaving bureaucratically, we say, is neutrality. And in the entire Mahabharata, the most neutral person that you see is Vidura. So we can use the metaphor of bureaucratic behavior towards Vidura and say Vidura was always behaving bureaucratically. Not that he was a clerk, not that he was documenting, not that he was behaving like any official clerk or any such thing. Only with regard to the rule-based person, always rule-mentioning person, rule-centered person, rule-obsessed person, Vidura was like that. Even when the most serious things like disrobing Draupadi happens, he stands up and says, according to act so and so, section so and so, para so and so, disrobing can be done or cannot be done, he mentions and sits down. He never gets into the actual humanitarian issues and all that. And probably to refer to this only, Vidura is considered to be a reincarnation of another character called Samavarti. Okay, and the very word you see, Samavarti, he is always Sama, he is neutral, he behaves as a Samavarti person. And Samavarti is a synonym for Yama also. And Yama's incarnation, according to Mahabharata, Yama's son is Dharmaraja. Probably that is why Dharmaraja and Vidura are the two people who are very, very close to each other. So Dharmaraja also likes bureaucratic behavior because he is also a rule-based person. But Dharmaraja is not all that bureaucratic because he is a king. He has to take care of his followers and all that. So though he likes bureaucratic behavior of Vidura as good behavior, Samavarti behavior and all that, because he has got his family members and soldiers to be taken care of, he also talks in several different ways of humanitarianism or caring for his family and all that. But the similarities between Vidura and Yudhishthira are like that. But what we call Vidura Niti, which was given by Vidura to Dhritarashtra as part of Prajagara Parva of Udyoga Parva, it does not have all these bureaucratic things. It has general governance message. What is good governance, how to rule, how not to rule, all these things are there. Vidura Niti is not a bureaucracy message. Okay? But there is a bureaucratic behavior there.
Right. So accepting the current scenario that we have in India, the type of democracy that we have, the political system and the bureaucracy, we always see this tussle between the bureaucratic system and the political system, where politicians, as soon as they come, they want to get the guys who are under their control, transfer the people who don't listen to them, etc., for their whatever vision that they have for their governance, and also bureaucratic system where they have a tussle with listening to the real bosses who are elected. Now, from the statecrafts of our text, is there a learning for the Indian system to calibrate or align, have some better alignment, or this is the way it should go? What is your take on it?
No, obviously you too know that that is not the way it should go. And I am also of the same opinion. It's a common sense that it should not be like that. Political leaders should not behave with their bureaucratic staff like that. Though Mahabharata does not have bureaucracy or officialdom and all that inside, in Vidura Niti and many other sections of Rajadharma Prabodha, we have discussions where the king is advised how to deal with his staff. How to deal with his staff. For example, Narada in Sabha Parva, when he does Upadesha of Rajadharma to Yudhishthira, he says, never dissatisfy your staff. He also mentions pensions. After the staff gets older, relieve them. And when they are relieved, you should continue paying them. Because they have served you for so long, you have to continue paying them money even after the word retirement, pension, they don't use these words, but almost something like retirement and pension is discussed. So there if you read, it looks as though he is talking in a selfish language. He says, if you dissatisfy them, they will not respond to you easily. So keep them always happy, keep them in your good books, then only they will work for you. Then you will come up and say, see, he is so selfish, only to make them work for you, you are doing. After all, that is what everyone does. Okay? You are not a philanthropist, you are not an altruist to give salaries to your staff. When you are paying well to your staff, you are also realistic that if you keep them happy, they work for you. That's all. So there is no point in saying that Narada is saying that you keep them happy, they will work for you. You keep your soldiers happy, they will work for you. You have to always keep your staff happy by paying them well. What is selfishness in this, right? So this is realistic way of advising a king that you should always keep your staff happy, then only they will work for you. But this is there, pension is there. And there is also this news, Varta, in the Upadesha of Narada to Yudhishthira. Narada says, you should always keep the Varta, that is messages, information, circulation should always be there. King should collect information from all parts of the country. He should be very careful with the news collection, which is very important for a king. In the Narada's Upadesha, he says. So, you may not have something like PTI or ABN or anything like that, or a real newspaper being run and all that. Concept is the same. Yes, you should have information, that's all. So when you read these texts, my suggestion to you is, don't look for things like exactly bureaucracy, exactly newspaper, exactly TV channel or any such thing. We have to grow a little above that and think that he is talking about information circulation, which is what media does all the time. So that is there. All these things are discussed in Rajadharma sections. Wherever Narada advises Yudhishthira, or Vidura advises Dhritarashtra, or Bhishma advises Yudhishthira, in all the Rajadharma Parvas, they talk about all these things. Okay? Thanks for bringing this up, because I was worried that this Vachya Upadeshas I am not covering today. Because of your questions, I could cover that also. I was worried that I was bringing only role model examples, but I was not bringing Rajadharma Upadesha sections. Right. Because of your questions, I could go to that part also.
Just one last in the same context.
With the permission of the audience, because
or else I can take it separately. In the same. Yeah. One of the kings, in the Itihasas that we are reading, they seem to be well equipped in many subjects. Okay. But the bureaucrats now, they are majorly generalists. They might have specialized in one particular field, except for institutions like ISRO or DRDO or a few other, which are led by specialists in the same field. Most of them, like for example, there's an irrigation project, there will be a bureaucrat who might not even know ABC of irrigation, who's leading that. Now, in this particular scenario, what we would expect the bureaucrat, in a common sense, is to take advice from specialists for the decision making or for the planning and all. But then he is in principle responsible. He's a project manager, for example. He might not be able to give that particular justice. So in that particular perspective, what does a king do? He just lets that work to be done by a specialist.
Yeah, obviously. See, when we say that something like bureaucracy, something like press, something like news was there in Mahabharata and these texts, we should not think that exactly the same structure was there. So, specialist and generalist controversy, which is in the detail of bureaucracy, it does not apply to books like Mahabharata. But as you said, whether the king takes advice from specialists or not, actually you all know that in history also, not only in Itihasa, in history also, we know that many of the Indian kings were versatile, highly knowledgeable. They were scholars in several different shastras. So, the Itihasas also have similar characters. All the characters like Yudhishthira and all these, they are shown to be versatile, highly knowledgeable in different shastras. And in all the advices by Narada to Yudhishthira, or Bhishma to Yudhishthira, or Vidura to Dhritarashtra, this word is repeated. They say, king has to be learned in various shastras, in multiple shastras. He has to know. But at the same time, Vidura tells Dhritarashtra that however scholarly you are, you should always take advice from specialists in various different shastras. You should not go only by your word. Okay? And he says how to recognize knowledgeable people. There is a section, 4 verses dedicated to how to recognize a specialist. Another 4 verses dedicated to how to recognize a non-specialist. How to recognize a bad guy, how to recognize a good guy. There are sections in Vidura Niti, section after section, how a king has to be judgmental, how he should have judging capacity of identifying good staff, bad staff, skilled staff, unskilled staff, specialized staff, generalist staff. All this is described in Vidura Niti. Okay? Okay. So, tomorrow we'll decide whether we'll go for human rights, justice and human rights, or art of war. Whatever the audience decide, we'll take up.